Most of the people around the world who hate America and probably want us dead hate us because of our leaders. Because our leaders violated their lives, their homes, their families, and their land. If they could invade us, probably none of us would be spared, even though most of us are against what our government does. Welcome to another episode of Political Newbie. I'm Noah Clark, a formerly ignorant, average citizen who's simply trying to make sense of the mess, and I thank you for joining me. So I'm going to start this episode off by giving you a tiny bit of personal history. I promise it'll be short. When I was younger and properly conditioned into believing that we were the heroes and they, whoever they are, were the enemies, I'd see sensationalized media coverage of wars and crises that were happening overseas, and I'd feel awful, but I'd also feel like America would save those people, would rescue them, not because I thought that America was obligated to solve other people's problems and go around rescuing everybody, but because America told me it was obligated to go and rescue everybody, right? And I also felt fortunate that something like that would never happen to me. My country would never be invaded, and I'd never be gratuitously murdered. I'm older now. I'm a grown-up. I am a victim of and witnessed a silent genocide that killed and maimed millions of people around the world, executed by the government, facilitated by the media, and the lifestyles of the murderers are still being subsidized by the taxes that you and I pay. Now, I know that our country can be invaded and we can be gratuitously murdered with impunity. If you made it this far, I'd love to see you in the comments. If not, leave a thumbs up and let me know that you were here. Thank you so much. Most of the people around the world who hate America and probably want us dead hate us because of our leaders. Because our leaders violated their lives, their homes, their families, and their land. If they could invade us, probably none of us would be spared, even though most of us are against what our government does. Something similar is happening to the Palestinians. Average people like you and me, average Palestinian men and women and children are just being erased. Just like that, for no reason. The only difference is that their governments and leaders were not plundering and pillaging and exploiting anyone's lands, lives, homes, and families. It was actually happening to them. Take a look at what's happening today, currently, right now.
You can speak with him? Yes. Tell him if he's not going now, I'm going to...
You have to explain why. It's his house.
Because the violence, okay?
This is very violent.
Who is doing the violence? Towards women? Towards women? Why are you doing this? Why are you supporting this? Why are you supporting this? How can you support this? Do you think this is normal?
Yes.
It's completely... I promise that your face will be everywhere. Everywhere. Yes, you can film me. I don't give a shit. Your face will be everywhere. Millions of you, I promise you that.
I really don't think that any one of us can imagine what that would be like if that were happening to us, and it was just normal. It was just happening every day, every other day, in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night. But imagine how much of a coward this grown man, that big full-bodied man, has to be in order to be pushed away by a woman that he was attacking and then go and pick up a boulder. Not to hurt, but to kill, because you're not going to hurt anybody with that. You're going to kill them with that. Imagine how evil you have to be in order to do that. You know, it's interesting because I see people like Myron Gaines and Stu Peters and Nicholas Fuentes online talking about how rageful blacks are and it's in their genes and they cannot help it. And I'm inclined to believe them sometimes because when I see all of this I mean, it's the countless numbers of videos that come through my feed of groups of black people fighting each other everywhere, in an airport, in a restaurant, on the street, in school, literally everywhere. They're just getting into these big gang fights on the street, and it's really violent. And I'm just thinking, like, is there a rage virus that people are being infected by or with? But then you realize, no, it's not a racial thing. It's a human thing. Something is wrong. I'm pretty sure rage is genetic, but it's not specific to black people, because you see what the hell is going on here. I mean, a man who is being protected by an armed officer literally had to go and pick up a boulder to what? Defend himself against this woman that pushed him away from attacking her? Okay. It gets wilder than this. The same amount of videos that I find of black people beating up black people in gang groups and very violent is the same amount of videos that I see of settler violence in Palestine. It is literally not a race thing. It's just an evil thing. People are infected with evil. Or maybe this is a result of mass poisoning, or the jabs that are altering our DNA. I don't know what is happening, but it is literally insane. I wonder every day, if I had been oppressed to the extent that the Palestinians are, or the Africans were, or blacks were during slavery, or Africans were during apartheid, or the Irish were under the Brits, and I were given money, would I take the money and keep my head down and remain in a state of existence where the money has no real value due to mass surveillance, control, and restrictions of a foreign government on my autonomy? Or would I take the money and build a resistance? And how would I respond if my resistance was countered with a genocide? Would I give up and apologize for resisting? Or would I reject that level of evil and tyranny with my life? I honestly don't know, because I've never been in a situation like that, but I know what I hope I'd have the courage to do. In my last episode, I mentioned that I came across some information about the plan to get aid into Gaza that gave me chills. It's so freaking dark. I was going from podcasts to news articles to internet deep dives because a lot of the information was new to me, and I was trying to understand some of these new terms and concepts, right? But the general vibe of corruption that was permeating from all this information that I was consuming was not new to me. After all the things that have surfaced about the government and the media and the intelligence networks and how dark they are, it doesn't take a rocket science to make the leap from, well, there are just red lines that our media and our government wouldn't cross. Yes, they're corrupt, but they're red lines that they wouldn't cross. To, anything is possible. Any and everything is possible. Everything from JFK to COVID to 9/11 to the fact that Al-Qaeda is probably a CIA cutout, is a CIA cutout. We already know that. I mean, it's endless, okay? How corrupt and dark our entire history, our entire reality is. And then you think about Signalgate, and you think about Mike Waltz spying and all of these double agents in our government, and you zoom out a little bit and you put that in perspective, and you realize that in 10 to 20 years, our 20-year-olds are going to be reading about this, and they're going to be reading it as conspiracy theories. And you and me, who are living through this right now, are going to be considered conspiracy theorists. They're going to repeat the same narrative that they did to the generation before us. It's going to happen to us. And, we have to hope that we're all working to prevent that from happening. However, I feel like it may be impossible with this European Union Digital Act and all the censorship rules that they're trying to impose to pretty much wipe everything off the internet, to rewrite history. And at the same time, they're threatening us with a new disease, this disease X, and they're implementing medical martial law pretty much, where they can kidnap you and inject you with a vaccine in the event of a medical emergency, if they so choose. Because the plan really is to make sure that we don't have the health or the will to resist while they're doing all the censorship and rewriting history and controlling the narrative. And our children are going to be growing up in this world. They're going to be adults in this new reality. I feel like this little bit of freedom that we have right now is the last of it. So it really feels like they're closing in on this global prison that they're trying to construct. In this moment right now, they're putting the final touches on it, it feels like. Now, it'll be obvious by the end of this episode that I watch way too much Whitney Webb and Catherine Austin Fitts, both of whom I respect, but I have nowhere near the grasp of this information as they do or as others do. But I wonder if there are other average people like me who share my rudimentary interpretations of what's going on, which evolves every day as new information comes out. So here is my rudimentary interpretation of everything, right? So the last week of April, Trump said on his jet that the U.S. is essentially taking the lead in addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, right? If you don't remember this, I will play that footage. Here it is.
Gaza came up, and I said, gotta be good to Gaza. Those people are suffering. We gotta be good to Gaza. We're gonna take care of them. There's a very big need for medicine, food and medicine, and we're taking care of it.
In terms of like opening up more access points,
pushing people very hard.
Pushing the Israelis
We are
to open up more access
very
points.
hard to get food and medicine into Gaza.
How did the Prime Minister respond to that?
Well, felt well about it.
Well, he felt really well about it. And what exactly does that mean, right? Does that mean that he is like, yes, I want to get aid into Gaza, or because the U.S. is pressuring him, or because you both are scheming and have some plan working out and Israel really does feel good about the plan? Which is it? But, all of this on the surface sounds good, right? Gaza's going to get food. We're going to get aid into Gaza. But at the same time, it sounds kind of cringe because why now? I mean, honestly, we all know that Trump doesn't exactly have a track record of humanitarianism. In fact, when the Yemeni people retaliated against Israel for violating the ceasefire and imposing a food blockade on the Palestinians, Donald Trump's response to that was dropping bombs on the Yemeni civilians, and then bragging about it on X. So it doesn't seem unreasonable to be skeptical about the fact that he has this sudden newfound impulse to care about what's happening in Gaza. First, right? Axios drops an article on May 2nd. That's about 2 weeks ago. U.S. and Israel near agreement on aid delivery to Gaza. Okay, so they're working together to get aid into Gaza. It doesn't sound like U.S. is pressuring Israel. The rest of the article goes, in recent weeks, Israeli and U.S. officials, representatives of an international humanitarian foundation, and private companies have been discussing a new aid delivery mechanism. Wait a minute. An international humanitarian foundation and private companies that no one knows of that consist of Israeli and U.S. officials? What? And they're designing a new mechanism. And the new mechanism will meet Trump's objective of allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza while honoring the Israeli cabinet's directive that no aid reach Hamas. Expect all UN and international aid agencies to work within the mechanism's framework to ensure Hamas lacks access to these critical resources. So basically, they're forcing the humanitarian aid organizations that should be conducting this project to work within their framework, whoever they are, this unnamed, unknown entity. Okay. Israel has committed to fund and execute the massive engineering work required to build the infrastructure for the secure aid distribution sites. A private U.S. company would be in charge of the logistical delivery and of providing security in and around the humanitarian compounds. The humanitarian compounds, aka the distribution sites. Okay. U.S. and Israeli officials also want the new mechanism to be ready and working when Trump visits the region in 2 weeks. So basically, this new mechanism should be up and running right now. So this article drops 1 week after Donald Trump says that the U.S. will be getting aid to Gaza. The timeline counts, okay? And that they're putting pressure on Israel. And Israel feels good about it, which is weird and shady. Okay. This is a picture of the sites that they're designating as humanitarian compounds. And then this article drops a week later on May 9th in a Swiss paper. Headline: New Geneva Foundation claims it can feed all of Gaza with help from mercenaries. I'm sorry. Why do we need mercenaries when we have humanitarian aid organizations on the ready, willing to go? Okay. And this article talks about a Gaza humanitarian foundation that was set up 3 months ago, in February, in Geneva, Switzerland. In the article, it states, Steve Witkoff, Trump's special Middle East envoy, presented the plan to the Security Council at an informal briefing on Wednesday. The United Nations has declined to take part in Israel's plan. Israel's plan? I thought this was US's plan. All right. Warning that it risks violating key principles of international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions. I would argue that it doesn't just risk violating key principles of international humanitarian law, it is actually violating key principles. Okay. With Gaza's production capabilities in ruins and food aid completely blocked by Israel for over 2 months, the UN faces an impossible dilemma. Stand aside as people starve, or participate in a system that may violate international law and risk legitimizing it, meaning legitimizing the fact that mercenaries can come in and provide aid and pretty much tell the humanitarian aid organizations how to do their job. To date, around 400 humanitarian workers have been killed in Gaza since the start of Israel's military campaign, which of course is what we should be calling it because this is not a war, this is a military campaign against civilians. Let's rewind a little bit and not lose sight of what they just said. 400 humanitarian aid workers. We're talking about a rate and a scale and an intensity of aid worker deaths that surpass any other recorded conflict in recent history, which makes Gaza the deadliest place on earth for humanitarian workers. Same goes for journalists and doctors. The way in which Israel has targeted and killed doctors, journalists, humanitarian aid workers, unarmed men, women, and children in an unprecedented way, and the media turned a blind eye to it, makes you wonder how much of this was planned. And not just by Israel. It's as if this conflict was meant to be as gruesome as possible, and we're all meant to be casualties if we get caught in a crossfire. Meaning, if we get caught noticing it, if we get caught speaking up about it, with the penalty being death for the people who are actually being caught by bullets and bombs for simply breathing, or a revocation of your rights and your freedom if you resist being complicit in a genocide. So let's go deeper into this, okay? Ali Abu Nima from the Electronic Intifada finds the registration documents for this new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, founded a little over 3 months ago, that involves U.S. and Israeli officials. And here he is giving a
registration documents for this foundation. This is the official Swiss registration documents for it. And
it's called like the Gaza Humanitarian
Foundation. It was officially registered in Switzerland on the 12th of February. And according to the reporting in Le Temps, this Swiss newspaper, the principals, the founding board members are pretty unknown. I mean, one of them is apparently, or they're lawyers. They don't have any background in humanitarian aid. It's not really clear who they're tied to. But one name stood out here, and we can see that on the registration document, Loic Samuel Marcel Henderson. Who is that? Well, if you Google his name, you get to Bloomberg.com, which tells you that he is the general counsel, that means the head lawyer, for a company called Protection Strategies Incorporated. And Tamara, if we go to the Protection Strategies Incorporated website, the description there is Protection Strategies Incorporated, PSI, is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that engages industry-recognized professionals worldwide to provide comprehensive security solutions and personnel security expertise to the U.S. government. Can anyone translate that into plain English in one word? Mercenaries. Yeah, this is a U.S. mercenary firm run by former U.S. military and almost certainly employing them. And this is one of the founding board or the chief lawyer of this U.S. mercenary.
So just to be clear, okay, some of the reasons why the UN is resisting this shady operation that has no connection to humanitarian networks whatsoever are, one, this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is linked to Israel's military and intelligence, which essentially delegitimizes the whole project. Okay, this is completely illegal. Two, Based on humanitarian law, aid has to be neutral and not tied to participants in the conflict, and US and Israel are perpetrators of the conflict. 3. Ignoring established UN aid channels undermines global humanitarian coordination. Basically, we have humanitarian aid channels established for a reason. 4. Using food and relief to reward or punish populations violates the Geneva Conventions. So basically what's happening here is these colonialists, these imperialists, the people who are pro-empire are literally saying, you know what? F the Geneva Conventions, F the laws, F the ICJ and the ICC, F all of these rules, okay? None of these things have to apply to us. We're powerful, we can do whatever we want, there's nothing to stop us, and we're going to bank on that, essentially, and embrace our colonialist instincts, okay? I mean, we're no longer going to feel ashamed for our genocidal instincts. You know, back in the day when genocide was cool, you know, when Leopold did it, when Hitler did it, when the Bolsheviks did it, when China did it, when India did it, when the Africans did it. Remember? Like, it was just like the thing. It was trendy. And then it went out of trend after World War II. Suddenly it was bad. Let's not do it anymore for whatever reason. And now we're just like, you know what? No, let's make genocide great again. Let's make genocides great again. Okay, and that's exactly what's happening, isn't it? So the UN believes that this is pretty much a stunt that has nothing to do with humanitarian aid and everything to do with political leverage, withholding aid for several months in order to get to a point where aid can be weaponized to achieve a political goal. This is all sounding pretty dark, right? Oh boy. When I was doing research for this and I wanted to cry because I can't believe how sinister this is. So here's a timeline, okay? Ceasefire began on January 19th of this year. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the Shadow Foundation, was set up on February 12th, a couple of weeks after that, by US and Israeli mercenaries / private company before Israel imposed the blockade. Then, a month later, on March 2nd, Israel imposed a blockade and held out for 2 months. It sounds to me like this was a plan drafted up in a conference room months ago. Here's an update from Bibi on May 11th. PM Netanyahu, today at the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee meeting, we are demolishing more and more houses. They have nowhere to go back to. The only obvious outcome will be Gazans wishing to emigrate out of the Strip. Our main problem is finding receptive countries. Mariv newspaper added, for the first time, Netanyahu said in the committee, while referring to the humanitarian aid distribution plan in Gaza, that receiving the aid would be conditional on the Gazans who receive it not returning to the places from which they arrive at the aid distribution sites. The explanation? In the places from which they came, they are mixed with Hamas members. So are they... Okay, so...
The Biden administration attempted to use World Central Kitchen as a front for taking over aid distribution and trying to undermine the situation in Gaza. And all of those schemes failed. And this one will too, because they don't have the boots on the ground to make it happen. And
well, this is where it ties into this new Israeli operation. Because the goal is to get the aid distribution in Rafah through these private companies built into this operation. Gideon's
to use it to say to people in Gaza, if you want to eat, you have to go to Rafah.
Exactly.
Right.
Because that's the only place the food is going to be.
This tactic here of weaponizing aid, as you either already know or can imagine, is not new. It's a very old one. For the Israelis, the response to October 7th was never about a military goal, aka defeating Hamas, or about defending themselves. It was always a political endeavor that the banks probably PowerPointed in a conference room months or years in advance of October 7th. With the BRICS initiative advancing and the global order shifting toward multipolarity, the dominance of the US dollar is under threat, right? In March 2023, China brokered a normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran with Palestinian statehood presented as a long-term goal. In response, it seems to me that big money like BlackRock and the military-industrial complex or, these big money corporation entities stepped in to resolve the Palestinian question on their terms. So, it's as if Big money wanted to prevent China or any BRICS member from using Palestine as a bargaining chip to gain influence in the Middle East. So what does that mean? It means that no one ever cared about the Palestinians, especially not Donald Trump or the administration, because all world leaders are currently racing towards constructing a global digital prison, and is being constructed at the expense of Palestinian lives and all the lives that are being squandered right now. And they will stop at nothing to accomplish this reality. Listen to what these people are saying out loud. Okay?
Because the intersection of big data, connectivity, and artificial intelligence, and what it does in robotics and genetics and all the other fields, Uli, that you mentioned, everything, that is changing our world in rapid succession. And the future belongs to those who can seize this change. We are positioned right at the cusp of this change, right at the center of this change. We can take it, and we are. It's changing us. It's giving us powers and prowess that we never had before. And cyber is a real domain of power. It's a new kind of warfare, very different from what we've seen before. I'm talking about the capacity, and it's not imaginary, it's not futuristic, and it's not exaggerated. With the click of a button, you can bring down nations to their knees very rapidly, if you so desire.
They've been saying this for a very, very long time out loud. They are ushering in the age of digital ID, digital currency, and AI, which means an open-air global prison. After listening to Whitney Webb, Catherine Austin Fitts, and others, it seems as if the tariffs are meant to cripple our economy rather than what Donald Trump is selling it as. More specifically, eliminate small businesses and maybe even cripple smaller countries. So last week, Ian Carroll, who's taken over for Candace, which is pretty cool, brought something to light that made me think about the tariff topic a little deeper. Take a listen to this.
Amazon was a juggernaut that spelled the demise of traditional retail stores, and in 2017, roughly 7,000 stores and 50,000 jobs evaporated. Between 2015 and 2017, of the 43 large retailers and supermarket companies that filed for bankruptcy, more than 40% were owned by private equity firms. But what's worse, private equity has started to master the art of the leveraged buyout, where they don't actually put up the money to buy a business, but instead just take out a loan using the business they are about to buy, but don't yet own, and they use that as the collateral to secure that loan. Quote, many private equity firms chip in only about 1% to 2% of the equity needed for a leveraged buyout and skim fees and interest throughout the deal. If things go well, the firms take a huge cut of the profit when they exit. If everything blows up, they usually still escape with nary a burn. Another common tactic used to gut a company is once you control it, you sell off all the real estate to your real estate buddies and then force the company, Toys R Us, to lease back its own properties for monthly rent, further sinking the balance sheet. The private equity model, often called vulture capitalism, is to loot and flip, not to invest or run companies well.
I don't know, but I can't help but wonder if this is what the big banks have in store for us. A leverage buyout situation of our businesses so that the big corps will have ownership of everything when the new currency is implemented. So the conclusion that I'm approaching when listening to all of this is that there were two plans. Right? So plan A, which was in effect up until about last year, where they aimed to preserve dollar hegemony, aiming toward globalism, which involved destabilizing the Middle East further so that the alliance between the Middle East, China, and Russia would be weakened, and advancing the colonialist Greater Israel Project, war with Iran, etc. Which is crazy to me because I just learned that the Greater Israel Project, doesn't just include Palestine. Like, it includes Lebanon and Syria and parts of the Sinai Peninsula, and it just goes on. And I'm thinking, like, wow, do all the Middle Eastern countries know that Israel had this plan to recover all its land, and that's essentially what they've been doing this whole time? Anyway, but now it seems like the big banks, big money people, are pivoting for some reason after Donald Trump's election and implementing Plan B, which is to abandon the dollar and ally with the Middle East, creating peace, and even calm tensions with China and join the global multipolarity initiative, moving towards digital currency, even though, from my perspective, China, the Middle East, Russia, and all these other countries must know that Even this initiative will be hijacked by big money if the West is brought into the fold. It's just what they do. I don't think the groups of people that are members of the big banks, big corps, whatever, can tolerate or accept real multipolarity. I think ultimately they want to monopolize power. I think this is why the South Africans are expelling the white Afrikaans, because they learned from centuries worth of history repeating itself. If you allow certain groups to settle in your territory and gain power, they will expand, exploit, and eventually exterminate. It's just what they do. It's happening to the Palestinians. And the Africans know that if they give an inch, a yard, and then a country will be taken. And the world will watch on in silence. And it seems to me like the Africans are no longer willing to play ball. They don't want to take that risk anymore. And right now, Elon and everybody's calling the Africans racist because they don't want to take the risk with settlers settling in their land and hoarding all the power and resources. And of course, I say certain groups because the Russians don't have a long history of colonizing other races. Neither do the Irish, neither do Africans. So it's the people who are born and bred to be colonizers with the supremacist colonizing instincts that you have to worry about. It's not as simple as white people, you know? Anyway, this global prison that the powers are moving towards and racing to construct, the digital ID, digital currency, digital censorship, medical martial laws, is coming at the expense of millions of deaths between the war in Europe, the current African conflicts, and the genocide in Palestine. And can I just remind you, just because we should all keep reminding each other, the first ever live-streamed genocide, which gives you a glimpse into how evil people can actually be. What humans are capable of. Now, I realize that my interpretation of all of this is rudimentary and probably completely wrong, so I welcome your thoughts and your interpretations and any corrections you may want to offer. And if that is indeed, right, if all of this is, or some of what I just said, is in fact their plan, what is our plan? We need a plan. Before I go, I will leave you with a post from another hero who's always fighting the good fight for us and our country, Thomas Massie, one of my favorites. He says in his post, GOP leadership put this Wasserman Schultz, former chair of the DNC, resolution to a vote and then announced we would go home a day early. I think anti-Semitism is bad, but dictating what people can say or think is not Congress's job. I voted no, and he was the only person that voted no. When are we going to do our jobs? And here's the resolution. The House of Representatives calls on elected officials, faith leaders, and civil society leaders to condemn and counter all acts of anti-Semitism. Takes all possible steps to ensure the safety, security, and dignity of American Jews in all aspects of their lives, including the workplace and college and university campuses, synagogues, and at home. And I would just like to know if any such resolution is made for women, is made for the disabled, is made for blacks, is made for whites, is made for Arabs, Muslims. I would just like to know. If anybody knows, please hit me up in the comments. Okay, well, that'll be all for me today. If I don't see you in the comments, please leave me a thumbs up to let me know that you were here, and I can't wait to see you in my next episode.